Quite a number of years ago, almost 30 now, I went to see a film. I remember it rather distinctly because at the time when I went to see it, my dad was still alive. And to be rather honest with you, he did not really approve of my going to see the film. I was a priest at the time, as I say, a kind of a baby priest. I was only 2 or 3 years ordained. And the title of the film was Agnes of God. It was the story of some rather unusual happenings in a monastery convent of cloistered sisters in Montreal, Canada. And that was part of the reason why he didn't think I should go see it, but the other part was Jane Fonda starred in it. And my dad did not like Jane Fonda's politics. At one point or other, she had protested the Vietnam War, and there was a whole squadron of people who used to refer to her as Hanoi Jane. I went to see it precisely because I did like Jane Fonda, not her politics, but just Jane Fonda. And I also liked another actress who was in the film, Anne Bancroft. And in the film, Jane Fonda plays a psychiatrist, Dr. Martha Livingston. And Bancroft plays the Reverend Mother of this monastery convent, Mother Miriam Ruth. And for much of the film, the two are in a clash position against one another. The psychiatrist has been sent to sort of examine one of the younger sisters, and Mother Miriam Ruth is not particularly fond of this. And so much of the film is a struggle between the two of them. And actually, below the surface of the film is a very deep issue. And that is the issue of the struggle between what we sometimes call the modern world, or the postmodern world now, and the pre-modern world. Mother Miriam Ruth represents sort of the pre-modern world. And Dr. Martha Livingston represents the modern or the postmodern world. But one day, the ice between them melts, you might say. And the two of them find themselves in a gazebo on the monastery grounds, and they enter into a conversation. And there's still a little bit of friction between them, but what melts the ice is that both women finally admit to one another their vulnerability. Mother Miriam Ruth finally admits that sometimes she wonders about her faith. And Dr. Martha Livingston, Jane Fonda, admits that she in fact seems to have more faith than you might think. Dr. Livingston, Jane Fonda, in the gazebo, lights up a cigarette, and she's smoking. And she blows smoke out. Mother Miriam Ruth has her mouth covered. And the psychiatrist looks at Reverend Mother and says, "Does it bother you, my smoking?" And the Reverend Mother says, "No, it reminds me." Turns out she used to smoke before she joined the monastery. The psychiatrist looks at her and says, "Would you like one?" And she thinks that Mother Miriam Ruth is going to say no, and she says, "I'd love one." And of course, she takes it and lights it up, and suddenly she's coughing because it's been a while since she's smoked. And then Dr. Livingston asks her a question. She says, "Do you suppose that if it had been fashionable, the saints would have smoked?" And Mother Miriam Ruth says, "Oh, undoubtedly. The apostles, they would have smoked long, filtered cigarettes, and they go through all of these saints. St. Peter would have smoked a pipe, okay? St. Isaac, he would have smoked a cigar and stubbed it out with the bare soles of his feet. Mary Magdalene would have smoked a Virginia Slim. And finally, Mother Mary and Ruth says in St. Joan of Arc, she would have chewed tobacco, And, the ice is just melting all around them. And then finally, Martha Livingston asks her a very serious question. And she says, what do you suppose today's saints are smoking? And sadly, Reverend Mother looks at her and says, there are no saints today. Good people, yes, but saints, no. And the psychiatrist says to her, do you think they ever existed? And Reverend Mother says, yes, I do. And Martha Livingston says, would you like to become one? And Mother looks at her and says, become? One doesn't become a saint, one is born a saint. And Martha Livingston says, but you can try to be good. And Reverend Mother says to her, but goodness has very little to do with it. In fact, she says some of the saints were crazy, but still they were attached to God, left in his hands at birth. And then in the most poignant moment of the film, she looks at the psychiatrist and she says, no more. We're born, we live, we die. No more room for miracles. But my dear, how I miss the miracles. The phrase in the Hail Mary that is placed before us today is this simple phrase, blessed are you among women. And this word blessed in the Bible is a rather interesting word. If you check the Bible, you will see that it is rather ubiquitous. It is practically everywhere. And our English word, bless, really comes from Latin and Greek. The Latin word is benedicere. The Greek is eulogemem. And what it really means is something along these lines. It really means to praise God for that which originates in God and that which is oriented back towards God. In other words, there is a sense in which something or someone is blessed because that one comes from God and that one is oriented back towards God. And Elizabeth says that Mary is the most blessed among all women, that in a sense, it is not due to some kind of self-righteousness on Mary's part, but rather simply on the fact that from the very first moment, Mary has come from God. Mary is oriented back towards God, and in her own way, that Mary reflects for each one of us the fundamental goodness that if we open our eyes, we often can find in many people and in creation itself. That our Blessed Mother is a wonderful reflection of that in the superlative. And so in honoring Mary, in naming her as blessed, there's a sense in which it refracts back to others and to creation and ultimately to God from whom it has come and to whom it returns. That blessedness, in a sense, it issues into thanksgiving because life is a gift. We may not feel that way at times. And I don't wish to make light of the many people who at times in their lives do experience pain and sorrow. The poet Mary Oliver has a very beautiful little poem. It's only 4 lines. It's called On the Uses of Sadness. And in the poem, she says, someone I loved once gave me a box of darkness. It took me a long time to understand this too was a gift. Life is a gift. Mary, in her blessedness, in her goodness, is an ultimate gift and grace from God to us. And she points us back towards God. And she sends us in the direction of seeking that goodness in and through each other. You know, I'm at St. John's now, I think 15, 16, 17, 18, I'm not even sure how many years, but it's somewhere between 15 and 20 years. About 15 years ago, I had a student in class. He was an art student. I don't mean that he knew art theory or art history. I mean he was an artist. And I was teaching this class. It was in the summer. And there were only about 10 students in it. I was actually holding it in the library of the house where I lived, the Vincentian house, because the class was so small. One day, he sort of lingered behind the other students. He didn't leave class. After the others had left, he came up to me and he said, "Father," he says, "what's your favorite passage in the Bible?" And I said to him, "Jesus, I don't know." I said, "I have a lot of favorite passages in the Bible. But I said, I think that perhaps one of my favorite passages is the visitation, where Mary visits St. Elizabeth." And he didn't know anything about it. And so I told him the story. And after I told him the story, I said, "It's in the Gospel of St. Luke." And I said, "It's an interesting thing that I read once upon a time that it's the only place in the New Testament where two women actually have a conversation with one another." And then I looked at him and I said, "And you can be sure that in the New Testament, when two women start talking to one another, God is up to something." And that is the truth. In Mary and in Elizabeth, God is up to something. But a couple weeks later, there appeared in my office a picture that he himself drew. I don't know what it would be called. I guess you would call it like charcoal and pastel, but it was Mary and Elizabeth. It was two pregnant women. The older one was sitting down on a chair. The younger one was standing next to her with her hand on the older woman's shoulder. I had never seen an image before. On the back of it, he simply had said, "It's to Father Whalen, thank you for class." And then he put the passage from St. Luke's Gospel. He must have looked it up. "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." And in looking at the picture, for the first time in a new way, I came to understand something about the gift that Mary is, the gift that life is, and the gift that each one of us is. Mary is most blessed among women, but she is not blessed beyond us or apart from us. And I think if she were here, and I believe in a way she is here, she would ask us to look into each other's eyes and to see more deeply the blessedness and the grace of God that is present.